What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the vlog. I'm Dookie Betts. This is going to be vlog number 11. Today we're recapping a session that we played back in early May, and we've got the 8 biggest hands from that night. Without further ado, let's turn some sand into gold. Alright, before we hop into the hands, I just wanted to make mention that we are going based off of size of the pot tonight, not in chronological order. So we're starting with the smallest pots and ending with the biggest ones. We're not telling a story tonight, we're just recapping all of the biggest hands. In this hand, we look down at ace-jack suited in the straddle, so we're playing 1-1-2 on this hand. We've got an under the gun raise to $6, a +1 call, a button call, and a big blind call. And when we look down at ace-jack suited here, it's a pretty easy squeeze. There's a lot of dead money out there. There's really only one strong range of hands that we can look at, and that's the under the gun raise. So we're going to squeeze it on up to $35 here. Pretty quickly after this, every player at the table folds with the exception of the big blind, so we're going heads up to a flop. The flop comes deuce 4-5 rainbow board, and I really don't expect our opponent to hit on this board all that much considering how weak his range is and how much he capped himself. So when he checks it over to us, we're just going to jam the rest of it in here for $90, and he pretty quickly folds. Not that significant of a hand, not really that interesting of a hand either, but ultimately it's always fun to take a very aggressive line against a weak capped range like we did just here. We steal the pot, onto the next hand. One more honorable mention hand before we get into the really big ones. We pick up ace-king of spades on the button. It folds around to the cutoff player who makes things $7 to go. And with this hand, we're obviously 3-betting at full frequency. We're going to bump it up to $25. It folds back over to the cutoff and he sticks in the call, so we're going heads up in a 3-bet pot. The board comes king 6-3 rainbow. He checks it over to us, and the way I see this is we're either way ahead or way behind, in the sense that he's going to have loads of air in his range. On a rare occasion, he will have 6s and 3s, so there's no real point in betting here. We're either going to get called by way better, or we're just going to take it down and not get any value. So when he checks it over to us, we check things back and allow all of his air to improve. The turn comes the queen of clubs, and it's now time to go for some value here. He checks it over to us once again, and we go for a small bet of $17. I'm still not all that convinced that he has anything in the value range whatsoever. So we go small, try and target weak queens, maybe like pocket 8s or something like that. He eventually calls the 17, and we're off to a river. The river pairs the board, giving us the 3 of spades, and now this makes it even less likely that he has the value regions such as 6s and 3s. He could have queens at a small frequency, but I really don't think he would play it like this. When he checks it over to us, we're going to bet $115 here, and he very quickly folds. In hindsight, I should definitely be betting smaller in this spot, try and get value from weak queen X and maybe 7s through jacks if he has those. Overall, the way that our opponent played his hand here, he told a story that he wasn't very strong at all, and that being said, I should definitely be betting a lot smaller here, try and get value from weak hands, rather than absolutely blasting off, getting a little bit too greedy. So yeah, at the end of the day, I got pretty trigger happy here, but you live and you learn. On to the next hand. Alright, full disclosure, this next hand is pretty silly. We're playing the stand-up game. It's 10:30 at night, and for those of you who don't know, we play the stand-up game to the death. It's not just about the money, it's about the pride and the bragging rights of not losing the stand-up game. We pick up ace-6 offsuit in the small blind. We see a +1 raise to 6. The cutoff calls, the button calls, and typically I would be folding this holding, but with the stand-up game being on, we're still standing. We flick in the $6, and so does the big blind, so we're going 3 ways to a flop. Going 5 ways here, we flop about as good as we possibly can. It comes 5, 7, 8, so we're open-ended. We're going to start with a check, playing out of position. I don't really think I would be playing any donks. It checks around to the cutoff player, who was not the original raiser, and he bets $15, about half pot. It folds back over to me, and I quickly raise things up to $45. We're open-ended, we have quite a bit of equity, and we're still standing, so we're going to play this one as aggressive as possible, try and sit down, try and steal the pot if we can. We raise it up to $45, and it folds back to the cutoff player, who pretty quickly calls, so we're going heads up to a turn. The turn comes the king of diamonds, bringing in the backdoor flush draw now. That doesn't really matter all that much though. We pretty quickly jam things all in here. We flick in $150 in green chips, and it doesn't take very long for our opponent to call. He's only got $125 back, but we're absolutely delighted to see Queen 9 of diamonds. We're way ahead of that. This is just a prime example of how silly our stand-up game can get. We run the board twice, and we hold on both boards, so we scooped this $370 pot with only ace high. Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. Next hand of the night, we're playing four-handed. It's late at night. We're playing PLO here. We're also playing 1-2. And full disclosure, guys, I'm not a PLO expert, so my analysis of this hand is going to be pretty elementary, but such is life. I'm in the big blind. We're playing 1-2. We see the button and the small blind limp, and when it gets over to me, we're going to squeeze things up to 15 bucks. This is probably on the loose side. This hand in PLO really isn't that great, but we squeeze it up. We're playing short-handed. Short-handed poker's fun. Let's build a pot. After we squeeze things up, both the button and the small blind player call, so we're going three ways to a flop. The flop comes pretty amazing for us. It comes 8-8-6 with two hearts. We have the three of hearts in our hand, so we're blocking some flush draws. And we're just going to fast play this. I mean, there's a lot that people could have in PLO. I don't really know what I'm doing, so we bet $15. The button calls and the small blind folds, and we are heads up to the turn. The turn comes the 6 of diamonds, so really doesn't change anything. If anything, it just makes this board even more dry and more safe for us in the grand scheme of things. We're not necessarily going to run into a straight or a flush all that often on this board. In fact, it's impossible. So once again, we're going to bet our hand. We bet $50, and the button pretty quickly calls. We're off to the river. The river comes in the deuce of spades. Again, seems like a pretty clean river card, and we're just going to continue to go for value here. We bet $100. Our opponent pretty quickly calls our bet once again. We've got a $375 pot here, and it's time to show down. I flip over my hand. So does he. He flips over 10-8. And we win the pot outright because we have to play 2 in this game. Ace-8 is going to trump over 10-8. We win the pot, on to the next hand. You see this guy right here? He's one of the splashiest players I've ever played with. And in this hand, we're going to be battling him in a $400 pot. Let's get into the hand. We have the stand-up game going. Couple guys still standing, myself included. It lips all the way around to me in the big blind.
Family pot.
No, Duke it is fine.
Ah.
And I pretty quickly squeeze things up to $10 with ace-deuce offsuit. I'm trying to take the pot down, trying to sit down and not pay everybody at the table for losing.
Are you standing up?
Yeah.
When it folds to the hijack player, he asks me if I'm still standing up, and I say yes. In my opinion, I don't necessarily think this is ever going to be a strong range. He just limped. He's asking if I'm standing. He wants to play cheaply here and try and attack me when I'm still standing. So I don't necessarily think he's ever going to have a strong range of hands here. He flicks in the $10, and so does the cutoff, so we're going three ways to a flop. The flop comes Jack 3-4 rainbow. Pretty dry, disconnected board. There are hands like 5-6 and ace-deuce that are open-ended. I have one of those combos. But aside from that, there's really not that many draws. So we're just going to bet small at a high frequency here with our ace-deuce, trying to clear out some equities against random overcards, maybe random like king 10, 10-9, things of that nature. We bet $10 and both players call. We're going three ways to a turn. The turn comes the 9 of spades, and I'm now going to slow down and check here. It gets over to the hijack player, and he bets $22, which gets the cutoff player to fold, and it's back over to me, and this player is very capable of turning hands into bluffs, splashing around a little bit, and overall just getting very out of line. So I don't really believe him at all. I think he just has air at this point. He might have a jack, but I think he would bet larger with a jack X holding. He also has a small physical tell where he looks somewhat uncomfortable putting the money in here on the turn. So overall, I'm happy to float here with the ace high because I think it's good for the most part. This might be a crazy call on the turn, but I honestly trusted myself to make this call with ace high on the turn, thinking that it was good for the most part. So we're going to the river with just ace high. The river rolls off the 5 of diamonds. And to be honest with you, I was completely content calling down here with ace high. But when we drill the second nut straight, it really just makes our hand that much easier to play. We're going to check in flow once again and let this player do his thing. I'm still not convinced this player has a real hand at all, so we need to get him to bluff here, and he is certainly capable of bluffing. He likes to bluff in a lot of spots. So checking here is absolutely our best play. And he's going to bet $100 into us. Now it's a matter of whether or not we should just call or go all in for our last $51 on top. In real time, I was thinking about the only real combination of cards that can beat us, which is 6-7. But as played, it's pretty impossible for this player to arrive to this river with 6-7. If there is one person at the table that I could give some credit to 6-7, it would be this guy. He's extremely splashy. But overall, it's still very unlikely. So in conclusion, we decide to rip our last $151 in rather than just calling.
Call. That's the nuts.
And we get absolutely snapped off by 6-7. Overall, pretty disgusting hand here. It's really difficult for him to have this one combo of cards. And especially the line he took, it really just doesn't make any sense at all, but at the end of the day, I'm happy that I decided to go for some extra value here. I'm also very happy with my correct read on the turn, but yeah, we just got absolutely wrecked. It's time to buy back and play smarter. Fast forward 1 hour time. We're now short-handed again. It's 11 o'clock at night. We're playing 1-2. We got a little PLO action for you here. We pick up aces with rags to go with it. We do have one flush draw as well. We see the button limp in for $2. I squeeze things up to $10. Obviously, this is a standard play. I'd say we have aces. The big blind calls our $10 raise, and so does the button player, so we're going 3 ways out of position with pocket aces. The flop is an absolute juicer. We see the ace right in the window. We flop top set on a 2-heart board. There are some straight draws available as well. We check for deception. We also have plans to check raise. When it checks over to the big blind player, he bets $27, very large size, into a $30 pot. The button calls behind, and when it's back over to us, we could just call and slow play, but that seems a little bit dicey with this board texture. So we're going to raise things up to $130. The big blind player now enters the tank for a very long time, and he eventually goes all in for $180. The button thinks about it for a bit and folds his hand, and it's back over to us, and we have a pretty easy call here for only $50 more. We stick in the money, and it's absolute music to our ears when the big blind player says he has queen. He's got one out. We're going to run things twice.
I'll go twice.
Twice. Oh!
Thank you for running that shit twice.
And by some miracle of God, this player hits the case queen on the second board to chop the pot. He even hits us with the, oh, thank you for running it twice. What an absolute needle. I'm super tilted after this hand. Really unfortunate run out for us. Instead of scooping the $417 pot, we're just going to chop it up and make a measly $19. Rewind back to 10:37 at night. We are playing 6-handed poker. I throw the straddle on in the under the gun position, and the player to my left double straddles to $10. So we're playing 1-2, 5-10, pretty awesome sight to see here. Straddles are fun, and this hand will get crazy. It folds around to the big blind player, who's on the tighter side for sure, and he raises things up to $25. I look down at Queen Jack offsuit, and I think I have a pretty clear call here. But at the same time, all of my options kind of seem like they're on the table at this point. Against a looser opponent, I could definitely 3-bet this hand being in position, trying to isolate so the double straddle doesn't get a good price. And against a pretty tight opponent like I'm up against right now, I think a fold is also fine in the spot. $25 is a lot of money in a 1-2 game. It's also noteworthy to mention that I do see this player limp quite a bit. I play with him a good amount, and typically his limping range is much weaker, so when he does raise, he's telling the table he has a stronger range of hands. So maybe in hindsight I should just be folding this hand pre-flop, because there is a strong chance that we're playing catch-up here with this hand. Nonetheless though, we call the 25, and we're going 3 ways to a flop. We're sandwiched in the middle of this 3-man tango, and we flop absolute gin pretty much. It comes Queen Jack 5 rainbow board. Yeah, that's a pretty solid flop for our hand, I'd say. The original raiser, the big blind, he's going to start with a very small bet here of $15, and immediately I'm starting to put him on hands like aces and kings. He could also have queens and jacks, which would be a disaster for us, but we're blocking those combos very nicely with our given hand, and there's also a queen and a jack on the board. This player plays with us a decent amount, and I don't really see him bluff ever, honestly, so I'm pretty convinced that he has aces or kings here. If he has queens or jacks, I'll tip my cap to him. So that being said, I pretty quickly raise it up to $60, trying to get all of my money in against an overpair or perhaps top pair, top kicker. After I raise, the double straddle player pretty quickly folds his hand, and it gets back over to the original raiser.
I'm all in.
All in. Wow, this one's quick.
And he goes all in for $180. I pretty much beat him into the pot here. I have top 2. He flips over ace-queen offsuit, which is an amazing hand to see for us. We only have to fade 3 aces left in the deck, or some sort of runner-runner combo, but that seems unlikely. We're going to run it twice.
Me.
And we're going to hold on both boards to scoop a $436 pot. And last but not least, the largest hand that we played in the month of May. 4-card game once again, we are 4-handed as well, playing $1, $2 blinds. We look down at ace 9, 6, 5 with 3 hearts and 1 spade. Certainly not that good of a hand once again, but we're playing short-handed. We can flop the nuts. We see the button open to $7. The small blind calls, and we call behind in the big blind, so we're going 3 ways to a flop. With 21 bucks in the middle of the flop comes ace king deuce with 2 hearts and the ace of clubs. Pretty good flop for us, I'd say. We have the nut flush draw as well as top pair. No real kicker to go with it, but a solid draw nonetheless. The small blind checks it over to us, and we're gonna check in flow. The button fires 15 bucks. The small blind folds, and it gets back over to me, and I can call, or I can get silly and raise to $50. We choose the latter. He snap calls our $50, and we're going heads up to the turn. The turn comes the 10 of clubs, doesn't really change anything. We're still pretty much drawing. Potentially we can get our opponent to fold here if we fire a big enough bet, so that's exactly what we do. We go all in for $165 effectively. Top pair with a flush draw. This player finds the pretty light call here with ace jack, just top pair, slightly better kicker than us. We have plenty of outs though, some live cards as well as the flush draw. We run things twice. We brick the first board, but we get there on the second board to chop the pot. Sort of an anticlimactic last hand, I know, I'm sorry, but it was a $450 pot nonetheless, and we chopped it to earn a small profit here. And yeah, guys, that's going to wrap up the vlog today. If you guys like this style of video, please let me know. If you guys prefer the regular vlogs where we go in chronological order, also let me know down in the comments below. I'm just messing around with some stuff in this one, so we'll see how this one performs. If you guys like it, maybe we'll do more like this. If you guys dislike it, we'll just go back to the regular style vlogs. Once again, thank you guys for watching. If you made it to this point in the video, make sure to drop a subscribe and go check out my Instagram page as well. Until next time, Dookie Bets out.